Of the Cattle USA Daily Podcast. Today, we are welcoming Callahan Grund with US CattleTrace onto the podcast today. We talk all things disease traceability, government relations. We talk about kind of the future of disease traceability, and then specifically what we can be doing as everyday cattle producers, feeders, stockers, sale barns, whatever your place is within the industry, that we can be proactive against just disease traceability and a potential disease outbreak in the future and stuff like that as cattle producers. I'm super excited to dive into today's conversation and let you guys just get in on the amazing conversation that Callahan and I had, and just talking about the proactive ways that we can be involved as producers in this ever-evolving industry. So let's go ahead and get into the conversation with Callahan. Callahan, welcome to the podcast. I would love it if you could just take it away, share a little bit about CattleTrace, what is disease traceability, all of that sort of stuff to get us kind of started today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on, Lauren. My name's Callahan Grund. I serve as the executive director for US CattleTrace, and US CattleTrace is a nonprofit organization solely focused on animal disease traceability and building that hopefully national infrastructure for a voluntary animal disease traceability system that can be used in case of a disease outbreak. We're one of only 2 countries in the world that doesn't have an animal disease traceability system, that being us and India, and they mainly export water buffalo. And so when you think about the U.S. beef cattle industry as a whole, we're the world leader in all things producing animal protein from that standpoint in the beef cattle industry. So we're at a bit of a significant risk there if we were to have a large-scale economically significant disease, such as foot and mouth disease, or any of those other ones that could pose a big risk. It would severely hinder our impact our business and daily continuity in the way we live our lives today. Not only from the price perspective, but also trading perspectives and rebounding from that as well. So what we really aim to do at US CattleTrace is we're a bunch of producers, myself included. I'm a cow-calf producer along with my excellent board of directors. They're producers made up of the cow-calf, auction market, and feed yard segments of the industry. And what we're really focusing on is that voluntary contact tracing system that's built by producers for producers that can work in conjunction with animal health officials, both on the state and federal level there, if we ever need to in case of a disease outbreak. And we can get into some of those details if you want to here in a little bit, but that's kind of the high-level 50,000-foot view of US CattleTrace as it stands today.
Yeah, absolutely. CattleTrace is just like an amazing part of the cattle industry, and things like that. Something super important that we have here in the United States, as kind of like you said, it's not something that we have at a nationwide level. Can you talk about kind of just a little bit more of the importance of this and why, like kind of the why behind US CattleTrace and stuff like that, and why as producers we should care about this?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So really the inception of CattleTrace dated back to late 2016, 2017. There were some discussions happening in the state of Kansas where I reside, really focused on, how can we be more progressive as producers to protect ourselves in case of a disease outbreak. We want to be proactive in this instance. Too many times I think in the beef cattle industry we're really reactive to situations as they come, and we're good at responding to those, but this was an opportunity as producers to be proactive and build something that worked for us ahead of time before we got to some instance where our hands were tied or maybe the government would hand us a system. And so at the KLA feeder, stepping back, at the Kansas Department of Agricultural Ag Growth Summit in the beef sector room, they said that number one priority is they wanted to look at building an animal disease traceability system. And then later on that 2 months later at the KLA Feeders Council meeting, they wanted to see how they could do this for all classes of cattle, so that being feeder cattle and breeding cattle. So as you may know, we have a traceability system in place for breeding cattle today as they cross state lines. So that would be any sexually intact animals over 18 months. So, cows, bulls, any dairy cattle, any cattle for rodeo or exhibition. Whenever they cross state lines, they need an official form of ID, which is an 840 RFID tag today. But we don't have anything for feeder cattle. So that group said, we really want to look at that. They make up the bulk of our food supply chain at this instance. How can we protect that instance? They move the most across the country. How can we protect that portion of the cattle industry? How can we make it a system that works for us as producers? So there was a group that got together, really focused on that, and put together a pilot project, which was the inception of what is now U.S. CattleTrace. It was the CattleTrace pilot project. It was $1.5 million pilot project, a third funded by the state of Kansas, a third by USDA, and a third by private industry. So it was really a public-private partnership there, working on, can we build a system that works for the beef cattle industry? Does the system work? And then 3, what's the economics behind it? And so it was a hugely successful pilot project, showcased that they could work in every segment of the beef cattle industry. We're well suited in Kansas from, if we're looking at feeder cattle specifically, looking from birth to completion of their life cycle there, having cow-calf, auction markets, feed yards, and packers all within the state of Kansas. And so really thinking about the why it's important for cattle producers, though, I think it's not something that we regularly see, that we can feel or touch. The risk. The risk is there. It's kind of like buying insurance on your house. Like 99% of us are not going to have a fire in our house or a flood or something like that. But we kind of want to have that insurance there just in case that 1% doesn't end up coming in that instance, so we can be protected, with our livelihood there. I want producers to kind of think about it in the same light, and I know it's really hard to do, and it was very hard for myself to conceptualize as well. When I went to work at the Department of Ag, I thought I wanted to get into ag policy as a whole, and Secretary of Ag at the time had taken a big stance of being one of the prepared states in the country, and said, I want you to work on some of this stuff. I think you'll really like it. And I said, I don't know anything about it. But going in with a cow-calf producer hat on, as we prepared as if we had foot and mouth disease in the state of Kansas. Kansas is the most prepared state in the nation. And I went, holy crap, we are so far behind, even as the state of Kansas, be preparing for one of these potential outbreaks. And so it kind of became a passion project for me in this instance. And there's a lot of different components to being prepared for foot and mouth disease. But at the end of the day, if we can't quickly, accurately, and precisely get our arms wrapped around an outbreak at the beginning of it through traceability, our animal health officials' hands are kind of strung in being a reactive approach to it. And foot and mouth disease spreads way more rapidly than COVID does. So we would likely have the disease spread way sooner than we would see it, the results of it on the backside of it. So really focusing on building that system and protecting ourselves up front and being proactive, I think is the biggest message I can deliver there. We have the last couple of years at our symposium done a kind of a live tabletop exercise where people could pretend, we're playing this through what would happen in that instance, and showcasing how with traceability we're using way less people, we're way quicker to respond, and hopefully we're way quicker back to business continuity on the backside of a potential outbreak there. So those are some of the important factors I think for producers to consider when they're thinking about animal disease traceability. And I'd say what makes CattleTrace maybe unique with some of the past instances that we've had with attempts to put in a traceability system is this is a bunch of producers this time. So we're looking to build a system that works for producers. We don't want this to be an added burden or onus onto your operation, cost, whatever you want to call it there. We want this to be something that protects you for something we hope we never have to use. But in the meantime, utilizing some of this technology to add some benefit to your operation in the meantime too as well. We'll have a partnership coming out here in the very near future, working with a company to really add some value for producers in the day-to-day operations with some of the exact same technology. So while you're doing participating and building a voluntary animal disease traceability system, if you're looking for some real dollars to be gained on utilizing, RFID tags or some of that different technology, we'll have some opportunities there for producers to take hold of that there as well. So it's not an added cost for you. It's something that can benefit you on the day-to-day side of things there as well.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about what does it look like every day for an everyday producer to be involved in a program like this? That's
a great question. Because most of the time I kind of skip over that and people go, well, what do I need to do? And it's very simple in nature. So, if we think about the life cycle flow, and I'm going to use a feeder calf, for instance, in a typical life cycle flow, calf's born on the ranch of origin. my ranch or your ranch, whatever ranch it may be. And then if the first point of commerce is where we're going to want to get the first sighting on that animal. So we only collect 4 minimal data points. We just do the ID, the tag ID, the date, time, and the GPS coordinates of where that reader is set up. So if we take it to a sale barn, if we take it to Salina, Kansas, to the farmers ranchers livestock, that'll be the first time that tag is read. So if you're just a cow-calf producer, the only thing you need to do, put in the tag. Very simple. From a CattleTrace perspective, you just put in the tag. We don't need your information. We don't need to know you tag those cattle. Just put in the tag. And then the first sighting will be at that auction market. Most of the time, if it's a weaned calf, a feed yard then will buy it, or maybe a backgrounder. That'll be the next time it's commingled around other animals from other ranches. The reason we do this at points of commerce or areas of commingling, like I like to call it, is because that's the first risk of a potential, disease spread when you're intermingling calves like that, like most producers know. And then once it, hits the packing plant at the end of its life cycle there, we'll know that tag is, or that animal is now out of its life cycle as a live animal, and it's into the food segment at that point. So, if you're a cow-calf producer, it's just with the tag. And if you're an auction market or a feed yard listening to this podcast, we'd love to get connected with you. Many of you utilize this technology the way it is today. Your technology provider, we could get hooked up there. And if you want to participate in kind of building the system, we can get you hooked up in that instance there, reaching out to us at CattleTrace. And so it seems very simplistic, but we hope we never have to use this system. So putting in the tag is all you have to do at that instance if you're a cow-calf producer there. And then, once we get to these other areas or segments of the industry, we want this to be hands-free. So working it with your technology provider, it's plug it in, it's hands-free from, as long as that reader's on, the data would be flowing in that instance there for disease traceability. And I do maybe want to take a standpoint here to say, that data is secure in the U.S. CattleTrace database at this point. That data will go in there. It's securely locked away. We have as many data security permissions and securities behind it as you can possibly put behind a database. And it's only to be accessed in case of a disease outbreak. So even myself as staff, I can't go in there and tell you, we've seen this calf 4 times or 6 times or whatever it is in its lifetime. We'll only know that based upon the disease risks to the industry. So if you're an animal health official, you'll reach out. It'll be whatever disease you do. And so then we actually even narrow that search even more. So we don't just open up the database. We, if it's foot and mouth disease, we do a 28-day trace back and a 28-day trace forward. And so you'll only get contact tracing data from that one index animal for that 28-day period, looking through that, I guess 46-day or 56-day period, looking through there at that instance. So, that's all that report would kick out there. Our board of directors worked with a lot of smart folks within veterinary colleges, state animal health officials to develop what we call a disease risk matrix. So, based upon threat to the industry, and the disease itself and how fast we need to respond and what that reporting needs to look like time period wise there as well.
So as far as if a cow-calf producer opts to not put a tag in or something like that, do feeders and stockers then fill that gap, or what does that kind of look like? Is there any incentive for people to be a part of this preparedness effort and stuff like that? Because I know it takes a lot of buy-in from the cow-calf producers right now, just currently, but can you just expand a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, like I said from the start, completely voluntary. If you don't want to put in a tag, I don't have to. Maybe you want to put in a tag, but you don't want your data to go. Don't have to there as well. Work with whoever you market your calves with, or tell them that in that instance. We'd love for you to. It's very simplistic and good spirited there as well. Now, it depends on the operations upstream. So a lot of feed yards are starting to utilize EID tags, and that's more for day-to-day operational purposes, for some efficiencies around their operations, but then also collecting back potential carcass data on some of those cattle there as well. So they may be owned by the feed yard, they may be customer cattle. They will utilize that technology there for more information gathering and operational efficiencies there to work through that in that instance. operational standpoint. Now, in regards to the incentivization for people to put those tags in, we're looking at building a model right now that hopefully we can call it a rebate model or whatever you want to say, to help in that instance of putting that EID tag back in and getting that back to the producer that put that tag in, or whoever purchased that tag and put it in that animal, hopefully getting them reimbursed for that cost of that. We'll see what that program looks like, but that's something that's on the horizon, I think, that we'd like to do in the future. But we're working on some of those things to get some more producer buy-in at that standpoint to do that. But yeah, that's a great question there, and something that we're looking on in the near horizon.
Yeah. So as far as just buy-in from producers and working with producers and stuff like that, on a political standpoint, a thing that we always talk about is we want to solve it internally before we ever have to make legislation, anything about any of this. We want to solve it as an industry. We want to solve it within corporations, things like that, before we need to go to legislation. But what are we kind of seeing on that front? Just as an expert in the industry in that area, what are we kind of seeing as far as just other industry relations as far as disease traceability goes, and then any other political things that may be going on in the current climate?
Yeah, that's a great question. Last year disease traceability was kind of a big hot topic. So, going back to about this time period last year, there was some discussion points. Like I mentioned at the beginning, since 2013, USDA has had an animal disease traceability system in place for those classes of cattle we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. They used to accept multiple forms of ID, but they did transition to where it's only an 840. So that's the first 3 digits in the tag. But that button EID, or low frequency RFID tag, is the only form of ID that you can utilize today. And I shouldn't say just low frequency, ultra high frequency as well. I know there's a company that had just released one of those out on the market there as well, that being Ytex. But that 840 EID tag is one of the only forms of ID that you can utilize now for those classes of cattle. I know it's long since been a fear of a lot of people within the industry that incorporating feeder cattle, because of the flow of feeder cattle, will be a big hindrance to the industry, and I totally understand that. Like I mentioned, I live in Kansas. I grew up in western Kansas near feed yards. Live in eastern Kansas now, where a lot of stockers and feeders run. I see the flow of thousands, hundreds of head that move through, sale barns, feed yards, etc. Like I said, we want to build a system that works for producers, and I think we have a good opportunity here with the technology that's progressed over the course of the last 30 years to do that, and really build a system that works for producers and auction markets and feed yards and all the different segments of the beef cattle industry alike. I think we have a great opportunity to do that. I don't think the federal government is looking anywhere in the near horizon to incorporate feeder cattle from a mandatory standpoint. So regardless of maybe some of the information or things you may have seen or heard in the news, I don't believe that there will be any mandate like that in the near future. Now, one thing to be concerned about, I think, is that, given the way that government works in general, obviously we have a new administration, but traditionally how government has worked, if we do have some sort of big wreck or something that they have to come in and they have to try to reconcile it at some point. So if we're not prepared as an industry, being proactive, like I mentioned, and building a system that works for us, we very likely could see a system handed down to us after a potential outbreak. Now, I hope we never get to that point in general, but we want to build a system that works for us ahead of time as producers, and so I keep coming back to that, but that's really the key selling point for producers is to take that instance of being proactive and building that system and having your voice be heard. Like so many things within the industry, if you want to make a change with it, be involved with it to make that change in that instance. And so, I think from a political standpoint there's obviously always going to be varying fashions of people who are super supportive and people who are not across any topic within the beef cattle industry. But I think, if we're looking at a larger scale there with any sort of policy or anything like that, I do think the USDA rule will probably stay in place. I think that we are looking at an opportunity there, though, to keep that separate over here on the mandatory side that's been in place for 12 years now at this instance, but really build us a system over here as producers that works for us with the technology that we need to be successful as producers.
No, absolutely. As far as we kind of like round out the podcast and stuff, the future of disease traceability, what are we kind of seeing on the horizons? Are there any big things coming for CattleTrace, things like that? I'd just love to talk kind of your thoughts on where we're going as disease traceability in the cattle industry.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to continue building the system out. So we're very, very small still in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, we've been around for almost 5 years as a full-blown organization. But really looking at building that system out, I think will be continually critically important, across the nation to work together and really kind of unify around one effort. I think that's kind of the important thing with U.S. CattleTrace is rather than having a bunch of different initiatives going forward, how can we unify around one effort, kind of tip of the spear, moving forward for disease traceability. And I think if we showcase some of that on the industry standpoint and say, maybe I don't love everything with disease traceability, but I'm comfortable with at least producers being in charge of this. I don't want to put tags in. That's fine. That's fair. We're a free country for a reason. You have that opportunity, but if you can be comfortable with it, saying, if anything, I may not want anything, but if it's that, we want to be a producer on, unifying and showcasing that, I think will be critically important to, having not only our state and federal animal health officials work more collaboratively with U.S. CattleTrace, but maybe even down the future, really solidifying ourselves as the national infrastructure. And it can still be totally voluntary, and it can still set outside of the government in this instance and, be for producers by producers. It would be really unique, I think, thinking really 10, 15, 20 years down the road, having a system like that on a global scale with our trading partners there. I think that would bring some validation to, we already know we make the highest quality, best tasting, safest protein in the world. Why not just add that other layer of security and confidence for those trading partners overseas there as well. Some big news coming on the horizon, I think, is like I mentioned, we're looking at we're very close to the finish line of announcing a partnership with a known and trusted company that's worked in some of these spaces for a long time, and I think this partnership will strengthen and solidify our efforts moving forward for animal disease traceability, but also traceability as a whole. I think it's an opportunity to blend the two worlds, allow producers to take advantage of some value-added attributes within traceability from the day-to-day perspective, but also continue to build that nationally voluntary disease traceability infrastructure there as well. So I'm really excited about that. I think we'll have an announcement later this month with that, so be on the lookout for that as we look towards the end of March. So.
Absolutely. And to all of you listeners out there, I will have CattleTrace's links linked down below. So if you have any other questions for Callahan or his team or anything like that, if you're like, hey, this is kind of a new concept to me, I want to, I've got some buy-in, I have questions, I need to know what I need to be doing. All of that stuff will be linked down below. If you're a sale barn, anything like that kind of wants to look in on having that option at your kind of point of interest within the industry, again, head down to the show notes down below. I'll make sure to have all of Callahan's links down there so that you guys can get in contact with his team, all of that stuff. Callahan, thank you for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate your time today to just share a little bit more about disease traceability and stuff and its importance to the U.S. cattle producer. To all of you listeners out there, make sure you like, subscribe, rate, review, all of the things. We really appreciate it here over at the team, and we will see you all tomorrow on another episode. We hope you all have a great Wednesday. See y'all.